Brilliant. Many thanks, Tom. Yeah, and thanks, Freya. And we were hoping now well, we're going to move on to the questions. So Dr. Pope was going to be able to talk a little bit about the sort of wider context of the agricultural research at the Met Office, and to say something about the application of the science into decision making. But unfortunately, as he's not been able to join us, the focus of the questions is very much to Freya on the presentation she's just done. And we've been getting quite a lot of questions already, and then the upvoting has been working really well as well. So I'm going to start with one that says, early on it was stated that non-climate drivers of risk are assumed to be constant. How valid is this assumption, and how can the results be interpreted if non-climate drivers have a large influence on the overall risk, e.g. hospital capacity for heat wave, mortality, dietary shift to agriculture, etc.? Freya,
yeah, so certainly that the non-climatic drivers will very much have an impact in what happens in the future. But obviously, as a climate scientist, it's not easy to guess or know what those changes will be. They are very much socioeconomic choices of how we move forward. So what we can do, though, from a climate scientist perspective, is say, well, we can look at how we project the climate to change, and then we can say, well, if all things other than that remain constant, this is the risk that we would expect to see in future. And then that can be then used as an adaptation planning tool, and you can then hopefully make adaptations which will mean that in reality, hopefully the risk will be lessened because you'll have made changes. But that's very much through the socio-policy route. So you can bring all this together with social scientists and do more integrated assessment modelling to bring in all these factors and look at how projections change under different socioeconomic pathways. So that's something that you'll see in the next IPCC report. But that's a very big project to be able to draw all that expertise together. So for a piece of work like this from a climate science side, it's an assumption that we can make that allows people to make useful choices.
Mm-hmm. Great, okay. So I'm going to go back now to a question that came in from someone when they first applied. So how should we measure the impacts of multiple hazards in the future when they're anticipated to increase in frequency and severity?
Yeah, so this actually gets, I think, to one of the other questions that flicked up about the thresholds that you're choosing to look at severity of impacts for. So some research will use a percentage threshold, for example, to consider what is an extreme event. But then obviously as things change through the future, then you're not considering for the fact that threshold's getting higher. So what we did here in this work was to use the same threshold for both a baseline and future period, so you get an idea of how the risk is changing over time. And so you then, but you do, to really look at impacts, need to have a solid understanding of documented impacts for the baseline period as well. So obviously, you can get an idea of impacts through looking through newspapers and things, but it's something that I've heard a lot of people in the community calling for things like impact databases, where we can really bring all that together, because it's something that in different projects or different sectors there might be impact databases, but it's not really necessarily all brought together in a way that's easy for researchers to access. And even some, it's also very difficult for sectors to necessarily attribute events to climate change. So that's why we have whole teams within the Met Office looking at climate change attribution, and you'll hear seminars from some of the people working on that later on in this series.
Right, thank you. Right, I've got one about from Public Health England. What is the timeline of these case studies? So Public Health England Climate Change and Health Unit leads on the health effects of climate change in the UK report that's due in 2023, and it's a deliverable under the National Adaptation Programme. They'll be interested in collaborating. So can you say something about the timeline of the case studies?
Please do get in touch if you're interested in collaborating. We can take that discussion offline later. But so as we've shown in these case studies, we're really looking at sort of decadal scale changes, so climate changes. So if we think of the next few years, really that is, you know, it can be, you get a lot of the effect of internal variability between that. So obviously we have increasing greenhouse emissions, but the climate as measured isn't. So climate is normally considered to be an average period of say about 30 years, and you know we use 20 actually in this, so you need long enough for that sort of average to change to really be able to look at long-term risk changes.
Okay. How do you decide which UKCP 18 tool to use, and what could be gained by using additional UKCP tools?
Yeah, great question. So we're looking here mostly with the regional projection. So so it's quite local, and so 12 kilometres is quite high resolution for a climate model. But we do have simulations for some time slices, some periods of time out in the future, 2.2, which is a really high resolution. So that product lets us look at extremes of rainfall much better, and sub-daily timescales. So if you're looking at events that might include factors like that, you might want to move to the 2.2. So, and then we've got probabilistic products. So that gives you a broader range of model uncertainty. So not the high resolution, but a bigger range of uncertainty. So I have taken some of the case study, one of the case studies that I've shown, and repeated it with the probabilistic projections already. So I'll be trying to bring in other products from the projections as well, because the different strands basically help you answer slightly different questions. So it depends exactly what the purpose, the questions you're asking in your research are, as to which products you want to look at.
Okay, thank you. How might we extend out beyond temperature, precipitation and relative humidity to secondary, tertiary risks, i.e. social, economic, political ripples that might require deep adaptation?
Okay, great, yeah. So this really gets to the heart of the sort of multidisciplinary approaches that I mentioned. So, so this project itself is a great opportunity for scientists from the very physical climate end to start making more links to social scientists and people working in the economic and political frames as well. And that's really a big purpose here, is to allow us to network and do more of this, because it is something that is not, it's sort of been tried for, you know, many years. People have been trying to do it, but it is very hard to do. So we have to keep trying, and we have to try and think of innovative ways that we can look at these things and provide evidence that will then help in planning, whether that's sort of very deep transformative change, which some people would argue is necessary, or you know but those then get into very much the political sphere of how we then manage climate change going forward.
Right, we've still got quite a few questions. Was a change in climate and future hazards considered by the government? I don't know if there's one who can answer. Was a changing hazard and future hazards a changing climate and future hazards considered by the government when developing the proposed environmental land management scheme policy?
Can't really comment on that. I wasn't part of the policy development team for that. I'm so
Right.
sorry, it's not within my knowledge, sorry.
Any response on that, Freya?
No, that's not something.
It's not a prize roll.
Okay, fair enough. And then, there's a couple more that would probably be a bit more suitable for Ed. How are local places, local government treated as a partner, lens or audience beyond sectors?
Sorry, it just went out for a minute there.
How are local places or local government, local government treated as a partner, lens, audience beyond sectors?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I've talked at quite a high level here about the agricultural sector, and obviously we've been working with organisations like DEFRA to get a big and sort of overview understanding. But certainly in some regions, we were very interested in focusing in. So, and again, that's just building those collaborations with more local stakeholders and local governments as well. So again, please do get in touch. There's within the SBF at the Met Office, we've got specific sort of demonstrator projects that will be looking at a very local case study perhaps, or developing tools that people can use. So although I've talked at a very high sort of broad level here, that's traditionally what we do in climate science, of course, but in this case study approach, we do want to drill down more local, because that then helps us do something that can be used meaningfully in a local area, and also really helps us build the methodologies that we can then apply to other places. But it's absolutely key to have local knowledge and understanding when examining these questions. So a lot of the UKRI projects might be quite local as well, we should say. And we really, we do want to draw in these audiences as well. So forgive me if I've implied a very sector high level. That's certainly not what we're trying to do in this programme.
Great, thank you.
You need both, basically.
Yeah. Just one specific to the NFU. The NFU have a plan for UK farmers to become carbon neutral by 2040. How might compound hazard events impact these plans? In particular, the plans to increase the carbon content of soils and plans to grow energy crops.
Okay, so I can't say too much about soils or energy crops myself, because that's not my speciality. But it obviously is something that compound events you need to consider in a plan. I'm not familiar with the details of the NFU planning itself. So for example, very heavy precipitation, risks running soil away in areas, and when it's very dry, your soil moisture can become quite an important feedback. So how transpiration from plants is affected. So that's quite, again, it's a very complex cycle. Science is very complex, and a lot of people are sort of working on these questions, I know. It certainly is something that it does need to be considered, and as I say, it's actually a relatively recent field in itself, really. And although obviously compound events are a thing that's always existed, often risk is examined just from one hazard individually. And so what we're trying to do here is bring things together. And arguably, I'd say that obviously everyone needs to be doing that, but we understand that it can qualitatively be quite hard to do, quantitatively as well, sorry. So that's why we've got this project, really, to try and help develop methodologies and also share code and things like that, so that it helps people be able to consider risks.
Okay. We've got time for a couple more, probably. So, but the Paris Agreement is listed in your model bullet points. Does this mean models assume that we keep below 1.5 degrees? Is this compatible with UK industry, including farming, and their contributions to anthropogenic carbon emissions?
So, the projections that I've shown here are using the RCP 8.5 scenario, which is not the same as the Paris Agreement. So the Paris Agreement is to keep global emissions to 1.5 degrees. So it's an optimistic set of policy choices, potentially. And then as people are taking on net zero targets, that's turning it into current policy. So that's not what the scenarios here are. They are designed as a higher end sort of scenario, but it's certainly not out of the question that RCP 8.5 could happen. We can't rule that out. So hopefully, you know, with the policy choices that are made and the adaptations that are mitigation steps that are made, we won't be getting to our RCP 8.5, but it's there because we need to see what a high-end scenario looks like, and then that guides us to making sure we can take steps to keep global warming sort of hopefully at a lower level. Because, you know, when you think of these numbers, so Paris is 1.5, but some regions, you know, will be seeing warming greater than that now. So you have to be aware that regionally changes can be larger as well.
Okay. You've talked a bit about that engagement and working with partners and stakeholders, but how do you translate this science to have conversations with diverse farmers? Because obviously there's lots of different types of farmers, about its implication for their future practices.
Yeah, so as I say, I've you know been in more in discussions with organisations related to agriculture than myself, but in the Met Office, from previous projects, we have experience with working more directly with farmers, and so and we learned a lot about communicating science, and so it is something that we want to do, to take our results and try and feed them back directly to farmers, so they have that information about how the climate may change and how risks might affect them. So obviously it's not appropriate to do that in the same way as we might give a scientific lecture. But through our climate services work, we have lots of experience in working with stakeholders on the ground. So we have the tools and experience to be able to translate that knowledge in ways that people will understand.
Okay, thank you. I think we just finally got, just very quickly, one final question. As we move into unprecedented 2 degree to 4 degree new era, is there a dedicated focus on the impact on farmers, farming community and social systems and their resilience?
Sorry, as we move into
unprecedented 2 degrees to 4 degrees new era, is there a dedicated focus on the impact on farmers and farming community and social systems and their resilience?
So as part of work like this, that is a focus on that. Obviously, you know, within DEFRA, there's you know, policy being worked on that will focus on that, and as we heard from an earlier question, obviously organisations like the NFU have their own sort of plans in place. So although it was an area that has been highlighted for not in terms of preparedness by the Committee for Climate Change, I think there are a lot of people now working and trying to address and fill those gaps. So I definitely say there is a focus, as in all sectors now, of the importance of looking at climate change in the UK and abroad, because this is a global problem as well as a regional one.
Okay, great. So yes, so thank you very much, Freya. I think we've pretty much come to the end of the questions. I very much appreciate your input there. And yeah, really, so yeah, thanks very much to Freya and to Tom.
Thank you, Freya.
For
Thank you,
both
Kate.
your inputs. And it just remains for me to invite you to join us for our next webinar. This time be hosted by my colleague Suraj Desai. And it's been given by Professor Hayley Fowler at Newcastle, and she'll be talking about what do the new climate projections mean for surface water flooding and the design of future sewage systems. So yeah, just to wrap up now, the recordings and the slides will be available, will be sent to participants in the next few days, and it will be available also on our website. So on behalf of the Champion team here at Leeds, so thanks again to our presenters, particularly to Freya for that great presentation and answering all those questions, and to Tom. Yeah, and I hope we can connect with you all again very soon. Okay, bye.